Hello, scholars. Happy Friday phone day. Today we will not have live instruction, so please listen to this video completely before you start the assignment. When we get together on Monday, we will continue our article group project, which is due on Monday. I want to remind you when you have live instruction, remember the Hackensack Middle School core values, and that is to be responsible, be respectful, be prepared, and most of all, be safe. Our goal today is to define key terms in lesson 7. We are starting a new lesson beginning today and continuing on Tuesday. You will be defining key terms in your notebook, and you will compare and contrast the key terms on your own based on your understanding of the definition. So make sure you complete the exit ticket. So you are going to be reading along as I read the textbook to you. So I just want to remind you, you can pause the video and find the page in the textbook. I just want to remind you how to find it. So you go to classwork, you go to science textbook, and you click on the textbook, and lesson 7 is on page 34, right over here. So page 34 right here, and this is the beginning of lesson 7. So go ahead, pause the video if you need to, and follow along as I read. Once you read, you are going to go into your science notebook. And again, I want to remind you how to find it because we haven't used it since November. So again, you go to Google Classroom. You're going to go to classwork. You're going to click on science notebook. And you click on your science notebook. You click on your science notebook. Don't forget that I have my model here. Which you can look at as an example. So you're going to update your table of content, and you're going to call it food chains and food web notes. And then you're going to put the page, the new page that you will be starting your notes on. So today we're focusing on updating our table of content and writing down notes in our science notebook. So again, you're going to be writing notes on food chains and food webs. You may be familiar with this if you learned it last year in 5th grade. So you're going to be adding key terms and definitions into your science notebook, and you need to search for an image that represents each term and add it to your notebook. So the first word you're going to learn about is the word consumers. And consumers are living things that eat other organisms to live, grow, and energy. So an example would be humans. So consumers are any living things that eat other organisms to live, grow, and for energy. Your next key terms are producers. So producers are living things that make their own food inside of their bodies. So we're not producers. We may cook food and consume other organisms, but we are not producers. So when you give me an example of a producer, you need to be very specific. So for example, I gave you an example of an apple tree. An apple tree is a producer. The same thing with consumer. So I wrote humans, but there's other types of consumers that you can use. Then the next two things that I want you to understand is the difference between matter and energy, because when we talk about food chains and food webs, we really do have a deep discussion continuously throughout the lesson about the differences between matter and energy. So matter is what all living things are made up. And these are these tiny little particles called atoms. So when they're all together, they make up matter. And you are made up of matter. So any living thing, it's made up of matter, which are made up of these tiny little atoms. Energy, okay? It's important that you understand the difference between two. Energy is all living things consume each other for energy. So when you eat, your body converts the matter that you eat into energy. So matter is what all living things are made up. And when living things eat other living things made up of matter, that matter is converted into energy for your body to live, grow, and just to be able to move around. You're more than welcome to use my pictures if you find them on the internet. So matter, you're made up of matter, and you eat other living things for energy and for your body to survive. So a food chain is a single chain that shows the relationships among species. So when you look up the word food chain, you're going to see just a straight little chain with arrows. And we'll talk about these arrows in more details during live instruction. And it shows who consumes who for energy. So it shows the relationships among these species here and who consumes who for energy. And again, we'll talk about these arrows in more details in our next live instruction. Food web. So a food web shows the relationships among organisms that organisms have with each other, and it shows how energy moves through the ecosystem. So I've completely forgot. Sorry about this, scholars. It logged me off. I forgot the food web clip art. So let me just download a food web. This is perfect. So here we have a food web. And as you can see that with the food web, it's almost like a bunch of little food chains together. So the difference between a food web and a food chain is that the food web shows a relationship with all the organisms in an ecosystem and who consumes who for energy and how this energy moves throughout the ecosystem. Again, we'll talk about these arrows. There's an importance, significance about the arrows and the directions of the arrows. So again, with a food chain, it's just a straight up single relationship between certain species. A food web shows the relationship with all the species in the ecosystem. All right, scholars, so that's what you're responsible for today, and that is listening as I read along, updating your table of content, adding your notes and images for consumers, producers, matter, energy, food chain, food web. And I will see you next class.